welcome back, and welcome to today's video. Excited? The topic we're going to talk about today is something that appears in the comments on this channel almost every single day. And to be completely honest with you, it's also one of the most misunderstood problems I see people struggling with all over the internet. Curious? Today we're going to talk about that sound. And what surprised researchers the most is that for many people the ringing was never actually coming from the ear. That thin, constant hiss, that high-pitched whistle, that ringing that seems to appear exactly when everything around you finally becomes quiet. We're going to talk about that moment when you lay your head on the pillow expecting to rest, expecting the day to finally be over, and you realize that even with the room completely silent, there's still a sound there. A sound that doesn't come from the street. Curious? It doesn't come from the television. It doesn't come from any electronic device. It seems to come from inside. Surprised? Some people describe it as a high-pitched whistle. Others say it sounds like the static of an old television that's out of tune. And there are also those who say it feels like a small motor running somewhere inside the head. Constantly, without stopping. Curious, if you've ever experienced this, you know exactly what I'm talking about. And the strangest part is that for many people, this sound seems to appear precisely when the body should be resting. Sighs. At night. When everything is quiet. When the house finally becomes silent. And suddenly, that noise that seemed small during the day feels like it fills the entire silence of the room. Whispers. Maybe you've experienced that strange moment. You lie down in bed, you turn off the lights, you close your eyes, and a few seconds later, you realize the only sound in the room is that ringing. So you open your eyes. Curious. You look around, maybe you even get up to check if something was left on. You look at your phone, you turn off the television, sighs, you check the window. But after a few seconds, you notice something that leaves almost everyone confused. Curious. The sound isn't coming from anywhere. It's inside your own head. Surprised. And at that moment, a feeling appears that's hard to describe. It's not exactly pain. It's not exactly fear. It's closer to frustration. Sighs. Especially when this begins happening more often. At first, most people try to ignore it. They turn up the television, they turn on a fan, they play soft music to sleep, anything that can help mask the sound. But as time passes, something starts to become clear. Curious. The sound is still there, always present, especially when everything becomes quiet. Sighs. And this is exactly the moment when many people begin searching for answers. Some people look for vitamins, others try herbal teas or natural supplements. Some look for eardrops. Frustrated. Others try white noise machines just to cover the sound. And even then, for many people, the feeling remains the same. Sighs. The sound is still there. Sometimes softer, sometimes stronger, but rarely disappearing completely. The medical name for this condition is tinnitus. But for people who live with this sound every day, the name doesn't matter much. Sighs. What really matters is the feeling that silence, something that once felt completely natural, has slowly disappeared. And here is something that almost nobody explains properly. Curious. For a long time, people believed that ringing in the ears was simply a hearing problem. The logic seemed simple. If there's a sound, then something inside the ear must be damaged. But in recent years, researchers began noticing something different. Surprised. In many cases, the sound people hear doesn't actually start in the ear itself. It begins somewhere much smaller. Curious. Something microscopic. Something that exists inside the cells of the body. And when that system begins to function irregularly, the brain starts interpreting a kind of electrical static as sound. The result of that is exactly the constant ringing that so many people hear in the silence of the night. Thoughtful. And there is another interesting detail. For many people, this sound begins appearing more frequently after the age of 50. Curious. not because the body simply decided to age, but because certain biological processes begin slowly changing inside the cells. Changes that happen over many years, almost always without us noticing. Sighs. Until one night you lie down in bed, everything becomes silent, and the sound appears. And that is when many people begin asking themselves, why is this happening to me now? Frustrated. And maybe the most important question of all, is there any way to reduce this sound? Curious. And that is exactly what we're going to talk about today, because when you understand what is actually happening inside your body, something changes completely. Thoughtful. Suddenly you begin to see why so many solutions that sound promising end up not working, and you also begin to understand why some different approaches, ones that very few people talk about, have started attracting the attention of researchers in recent years. Curious. But before we talk about possible solutions, you first need to understand the mechanism behind all of this. Because once you understand what is happening inside the cells of your own body, the problem stops feeling like a mystery. Thoughtful. And it starts to make a lot more sense. For many years, most explanations about tinnitus stopped at the ear. People were told that something in the hearing system had been damaged and that the constant sound they were hearing was simply the result of that damage. But researchers eventually realized that this explanation didn't tell the whole story. If the problem were only physical damage inside the ear, the sound would behave in a very predictable way. It would remain constant. It wouldn't suddenly seem louder just because the environment became quiet. Curious. And yet, that is exactly what millions of people experience. Surprised. The sound changes. Some days it feels softer. Other nights it becomes much stronger. Sometimes it almost disappears during the day, and then returns the moment you lie down in silence. When scientists began studying this pattern more closely, they discovered something surprising. Surprised. In many cases, the problem does not start only in the ear. It begins in the energy system of the cells that allow the ear to function. Inside the inner ear, there are thousands of extremely delicate cells. These cells work like microscopic microphones. They detect vibrations in the environment and convert those vibrations into electrical signals that the brain interprets as sound. But to perform that job, those cells need one thing above all else: pause. Energy. A lot of energy. And the structures responsible for producing that energy are called mitochondria, tiny power plants inside the cells that generate the fuel needed for everything to function correctly. Curious. The problem is that as the body ages, the efficiency of these cellular power plants can begin to decline. Size. When that happens, some cells start sending irregular signals to the brain. Instead of a clean electrical signal, the brain begins receiving something closer to interference. Pause. A kind of static. And the brain interprets that static in the only way it knows how. Curious. As sound. That is why many researchers today describe tinnitus not simply as a hearing problem, but as a signal processing issue within the auditory system. And there is another factor that can intensify this process: silent inflammation. Pause. Over time, the body can develop small inflammatory processes that affect the nervous system. These processes often don't cause pain directly, but they can interfere with how nerve signals travel through the body. Thoughtful. Imagine an electrical wire whose insulation has started to wear away. The current still passes through the wire, but it may fluctuate. Curious? It may create small disturbances along the way. Something very similar can happen within the nerves responsible for hearing. When the brain notices that auditory signals are unstable, it tries to compensate by increasing its sensitivity. It turns up the internal volume, trying to detect external sounds more clearly. The problem is that when there are no external sounds, especially at night, the brain ends up amplifying the internal signal instead. Size. And that is why so many people say the ringing seems much louder in the silence of the night. Curious. But here is the interesting part. The human body has natural repair cycles. Excited. And one of the most important ones happens at night. During deep sleep, the body activates processes that help clear cellular waste, reduce inflammation, and restore metabolic balance. Size. This is when many cells attempt to repair themselves. And that is exactly why certain habits before bed can help create a better environment for that recovery process. Curious. One simple home method that many people use involves 3 natural ingredients: ginger, lemon, and warm water. You can prepare it like this. Take about 200 milliliters of warm water, not boiling. Add a thin slice of fresh ginger and let it steep for about 5 minutes. Curious. Then squeeze the juice of half a lemon into the mixture. Some people also add a small pinch of magnesium powder if they have it available. Thoughtful. This drink contains natural compounds that may support the body's inflammatory balance and help improve microcirculation. Many people say this simple nightly habit helps their body relax and creates a better biological environment for the nervous system. But here is something important to understand. Curious. While natural methods like this can help, they usually take a long time to produce noticeable changes. Size. And the reason is simple. The concentration of active compounds in home remedies is relatively low. On top of that, a large portion of those nutrients is broken down or filtered during digestion before they ever reach the inner ear. And the inner ear is one of the hardest places in the human body for nutrients to reach. Curious. It's like trying to water a plant located at the end of a very long pipe. Some water arrives, but much of it is lost along the way. Size. This is exactly why researchers began studying specific combinations of nutrients that the body can absorb and transport more efficiently toward the auditory system. Among them are highly bioavailable forms of magnesium and zinc, 2 minerals that play key roles in nervous system function. Additionally, compounds that support mitochondrial energy production, such as coenzyme Q10, have also gained significant attention in recent studies. Excited. When these nutrients finally reach the auditory cells, something interesting can happen. Those cells begin receiving the fuel they need to function more steadily again. And when the signals sent to the brain become more stable, the brain stops amplifying that constant interference. Many people describe the first sign of improvement as something very simple. Curious. Moments of silence. Small moments when the ringing feels distant or disappears for a few minutes. Size. Today, there is an approach that combines these nutrients into a formulation specifically designed to support auditory cell function and help the body restore that balance. And if you want to understand exactly how this approach works and see the full explanation behind these nutrients, I left a link in the pinned comment below this video. In that presentation, you'll see exactly which compounds are involved, how they work inside the body, and why this method has been attracting so much attention recently. Now, there is one question that many people ask when they reach this point in the explanation. Curious. If the problem involves cellular energy, inflammation, and the difficulty of delivering nutrients to the inner ear, then why has almost nobody been talking about this approach until recently? The answer is actually quite simple. Size. For many years, most treatments focused only on the symptom, not on the underlying mechanism behind it. Many solutions try to mask the sound. Curious. Some use devices that produce white noise. Others focus on helping the brain simply get used to the ringing. But none of those approaches truly address what may be happening inside the cells themselves. And when researchers began looking at tinnitus from this different perspective, studying cellular metabolism and the health of the nervous system, curious, a new direction of research started to gain attention. Scientists began analyzing how certain nutrients affect the functioning of auditory cells. Curious, and something interesting began to appear. When specific compounds were able to reach the inner ear in adequate amounts, many people reported gradual changes in the intensity of the ringing. Curious. Not an instant transformation. In most cases, the first sign was something small, short moments of silence. Surprised, brief periods when the ringing seemed to fade away for a few minutes. For someone who hears that sound every day, those moments can feel incredibly meaningful. Thoughtful, because they show that the auditory system still has the ability to rebalance itself, and that realization changes the way many people begin to see the problem. Curious. In recent years, researchers have developed specialized formulations that combine these nutrients in concentrations far greater than what you would normally obtain from home remedies. These formulations typically include essential minerals that support the nervous system, compounds that help reduce inflammatory stress, and nutrients that support energy production inside the mitochondria. The goal of this approach is simple: to help auditory cells regain the energy they need to send stable signals to the brain, and when those signals become more stable, the brain no longer needs to amplify the internal interference that creates the ringing. Size. Many people who try this type of approach describe the beginning of change in a very similar way. First, small moments of silence. Then, longer periods where the ringing feels much more distant. Over time, some people say the sound stops dominating their attention and begins to fade into the background. Size. And that can make a profound difference in daily life. Recently, many individuals have started sharing their experiences with this type of approach. Curious. A woman in her mid-50s described that after several weeks she noticed something that had not happened in years. She lay down at night, and for a few minutes she heard nothing at all. Size. A man in his early 60s said that the first sign of improvement came during a quiet walk in the park. Curious. He suddenly realized he was no longer paying attention to the ringing. Surprised. These experiences do not mean every person will respond in exactly the same way. Each body is different, but the pattern itself is interesting. Curious. When cells receive the support they need, the auditory system may begin to stabilize again, and that leads to something important. Pause. If you have made it this far in the video, it is probably because you want to understand what might be happening inside your own body. Thoughtful. Maybe you have already tried a few solutions. Maybe you have done your research. Curious. Or maybe you are simply tired of living with that constant internal noise. Size. If that is the case, there is a detailed presentation that explains exactly how this nutrient-based approach works and why it has attracted so much attention in recent years. In that presentation, you will see the specific compounds involved, how they support cellular energy and nervous system balance, and why many people over 50 have become interested in this strategy. I placed the access to that explanation in the pinned comment right below this video. If you want to understand the full protocol and see how this approach works in more detail, you can find everything there. Curious. Silence.